Hello everybody. Let me know if the sound is okay, because as many of you know, I do have problems in that area sometimes. Also on that front, if you've watched the show before, you know sometimes I have throat and cough problems, and I can't take my cough syrup right now because I have some driving and stuff to do. So I'm going to be sucking on cough drops, and I apologize if the sound of that is irritating to anyone. Looks like If He Paints is able to join us today. Hello. Trash is here, Julia Trent. Quindy is assisting me because we're all alone. Justin's not available, so we're handling everything today. So if we can't fix it and my local tech support can't fix it, the show will probably just disappear, but I very much suspect nothing will happen. So it's still Halloween, yay! I checked and it sounds like the ghoulie bags are, hi Carrie. They've run out of the ghoulie bags, but they should have everything else still. So, and if you've been working on something for the skull contest, I think you have until the 28th, so you need to get working. You know, work while you listen or something. I'll switch over to the other view and turn on more light. Oh, and the other view is not working. Hold on, that one I can fix. Momentarily. I thought. Okay, hold on. I know we can fix it. We'll do the perennial turn it on and off again. There it is, I think. Zoom in a little. So this is the... So you didn't get one in time, Trash? That's unfortunate. They'll be back next year, though. There's always a next year. So this is Sugar Skull. It comes in 2 parts, but it's pretty easy to assemble. You just... despite the lies, what I'm doing. The less steep or the shorter slope goes towards the back of the skull. And I just used gel super glue. And I think that means that our 2 breast cancer awareness pinks should still be going out in bags. This is, you have to have a package that it fits in, but it's any amount of purchase. But you get one or the other, not both of them. And then for purchases $20 and over is this graveyard entryway, I think it's called. And you can take a picture if you assemble it and paint it and stuff. You can put a miniature on there, take a picture, and use the hashtag hashtag Reaptober, and I think they will share your images. So that's kind of cool. You get your minis out there, get some eyeballs on them. If he says, I really wish they labeled the new BCA pink separately, I don't think I got it. Yeah, I'm not even sure if there was just one new one or if there were multiple variations, but hi, green users. Hopefully there'll continue to be variations on the pink, because I know that there are a lot of people out there, and it's not like I don't have a few bottles of the original too. But there's a lot of us who could use a different color. Valender's here this afternoon, but only on his lunch break. Yeah, Valender, I think they ran out of the first batch of this and they did another mix, and I don't know if it was the same colors. I don't get all the news. And then of course the little, these little guys are only on sale until the end of the month. So this is what I worked on last week, was painting this Betty the Ghost Bride, somewhat in the style that I had painted the original one. I was trying to come up with a fairly similar color recipe, because I'm happy to share the one that I used previously, but all of those colors are now discontinued. So I'm just going to go into the, now that I can do the pictures, I'm going to show you a comparison of the two together because that's kind of interesting. So this is the original that I painted in 2015. And let me just get my mouse pointer going. That's the one I painted last week. So the color's just a little bit greener, but the color scheme, if you go on my website that will be at the top of the screen back when I come out of the pictures, my current post is, also if you want to see more comparison pictures between these two, my current post is a comparison between them, and it lists the color schemes for both. And if you leave out the green, I just added a little touch of green on this one. If you leave that out, you'll get something that's much more similar to, this is last year's, 2015. You'll get something more similar to this 2015 color. Valor says, so a bluish shade of teal on the older one, true teal on the newer one. You'll be able to see the color palettes in just a minute. The old, I hope I hit that. Sometimes it can go on autoplay. So that's the new one. Okay, I thought we already had that. Am I going backwards? Okay, so here you can see where I've pulled out the colors from the hair, and the face has the most color difference. I used a few more greens in the face. This picture is on the blog page, so if you want to be able to look at it at your leisure and kind of spot both the contrast and the color differences more closely, you can do that online. This is the original palette that I use, so it's kind of faded blues. So not like a true regular blue. I'm not a big true regular blue lover. Part of that's the contrast Ballender. I painted the newer one with a lot more contrast. Part of the lower contrast on the 2015 one, these are the colors from the one last week. So the greens up at the top there, I didn't use a lot of that, just a little bit on the face, but I mixed a little bit of those into the blue colors. So if you don't mix any of those greens in, the colors that I showed previously, you'll get something closer, these colors. If you leave out this green, you'll get something closer to the original Betty. But I did paint the new one with a lot more contrast. I wasn't even thinking about it exactly. I just was kind of, since I was painting on stream, I was just kind of painting as I normally do. I do paint with a little more contrast than I did in 2015, because that's something you never stop having to try at that, I think. But also in the 2015 one, I was very conscious of the fact that this is a ghost. Hey, in trouble. And so I deliberately painted the hair a little more faded and stuff like that. And I didn't make that choice on the one I painted last week. So it may be that some people are going to prefer the 2015 one, even though it's older, because it evokes that ghost type of idea better. I've had a couple comments on when I posted links to the blog posts and stuff of people saying that they did like the original better. And one person pointed out that they liked the original better because it's cleaner. And that's 100% true. I painted this in 2 hours on stream. It's not a perfect, neat paint job like I would normally try to do for Reaper. Well, I don't know if I normally manage perfect for Reaper, but I do try for neat. And I'm going to talk about that in more detail in a future post, because I think it has some interesting lessons for us on the idea of practicing more efficiently and then also things we can do to improve contest painting. So this is a figure I painted a long time ago. And I just brought it because it has a little cat. Because today we're going to paint a little black cat. And I had previously painted a Halloween miniature with a little black cat. So this is a much bigger scale cat, of course. This is one of the familiars that go with the characters like Betty, the Bonesylvanians. And the familiars are on sale this month too. And then I believe they go back in the vault. So some of the Bonesylvanians are available in bones all the time, and then not all of them were made into bones. And this is a figure. This is actually, I haven't worked in this style a lot. Not the cat was painted normally. But the figure itself was kind of like a Zenithal Prime, and then painting over that with transparent paint to add color. And then you have to add some opaque highlights back in and stuff. It's an interesting technique, and I would like to go back to exploring it more, 10 years later or whatever it was. But you know how it goes. I actually have been thinking about painting like that a little more. So I had already started on this figure. Not last week, but the time before. And I wasn't quite sure what to do with the owl. I've looked up pictures of, I think great horned owl is the one that I decided I liked. So I'm going to have a picture off to the side. I ended up just doing a general Google search, not looking on the royalty-free sites. So I don't have one that I'm going to share on screen. But the thing I liked about the great horned owl is that the eyes and even the face, although I think I probably won't add that component into the miniature, but the eyes are like bright yellow, so it's going to give me something saturated to work with so that the face of the owl doesn't get lost next to the really bright colors on the pumpkin. And then so these three are all together in a pack if you wanted to buy them until the end of the month. So there's the little kitty, the owl sitting on a pumpkin, and then these bats on a tombstone with a tree are the other guys I'm going to work on. And I'm going to do classic black bats. I couldn't find it. Somewhere like one of the first miniatures I ever painted was a bat from Warhammer Quest. And I looked at bats and there was one that had, I think it was gray wing sails, and then it looked like pink where the bones were, pink skin where the bones were, and then kind of a fawn colored fur or something. And I thought that was interesting to do a non-stereotypical bat. And I meant to grab a picture and put it up or find the figure, but I wasn't able to do either. And then this is nothing to do with Halloween. I'm just working on this for Ron, but I thought I would share. This is Chop of Chop and Grub, one of the figures that came out from ReaperCon. So it's one of the little people that runs Chop Scullery. That's kind of like a restaurant in, and now my brain is blanking. Brinewind. I am also going to have to ask Quindy to, yeah, I'm pretty happy with how his face came out too. I don't know what was happening. I wasn't doing anything special or working really hard, but it just turned out well for some reason. But I'm going to have to ask Quindy to help me stay on target time-wise, because I ended up having, the reason I can't take cough syrup if I start coughing a lot, hi Teely, is that I have stuff to do after this, so I need to be more aware of the time. I'm going to go ahead and try having the palette under the camera. It worked with the weld palette last week, so I'm going to cross my fingers that it'll work with this. And the nice thing about having three of these little guys is that I'll be able to swap between things when they're wet. So this is just primer currently. I didn't do actual paint, so I do want to give it a little bit of paint. And for whatever reason, I've just pulled out some paints to have an aside thing. I picked Besmara Black from the Pathfinder line because I haven't painted with that a lot. And I thought I had some other Pathfinder paints that I ended up picking up, so I thought I would just go with that. As ever, I have, right before the show starts, I shake my paints. So the amount of shaking you see me do, you should be doing more than that when you're painting at home. I just don't want you to have to listen to my little mechanical paint gizmo. So hopefully everyone's having a good time getting ready for Halloween. Decorating your house, or getting a costume together, or just stuffing your face with candy, whatever you're doing. It's all good. We finally got our animatronic yard dragon up, although I don't really consider him, you know, they sold him to us at Halloween, but I pretty much leave him up until it's time to put the animatronic Christmas dragon up. Does it look dark on your screens? I can't tell if it, my screen is not the best, so I'm not sure if I should adjust the lightness a bit more. I feel like I'm gonna, no, that's not what I'm looking for. If it's glaring on anyone's screen, let me know and I will dial that back. But my monitor is not the best. I'm probably going to need a lot more black than that because we have bats and a little kitty cat. We were trying to put, we have a couple of cat costumes. Mostly I just bother them at Christmas. And we make them wear them long enough to take a picture, and that's pretty much the end of that. But I had found jester costume that we bought our cat Archer a long time ago. And Archer died around this time last year, so he's not being tortured with that this year. But we tried putting that on our cat Corbin, who is a very big cat, and the little hood just kept falling off of his giant head. So I don't know if he needs like dog-sized costumes or what, but it doesn't look like the little cat costumes are going to cut. Yeah, I need way more black. I don't even know what I was thinking. Let's see. T. Lee says, semi-skippy Halloween this year. We're in a basement suite, so no trick-or-treaters to decorate or dress up for. I'm working from home and still in semi-lockdown here, so no other parties or anything. I will be trying to carve a pumpkin for the hubby's work contest. Ooh, that sounds like fun. I've seen some really amazing pumpkin carving. Yeah, we're not in lockdown, although my husband and I choose to mostly live like we are still. Although we did go out in the world yesterday, and that was a mixed experience. There were so many people out. It almost felt like not like full on Christmas shopping, but when people are starting to get ready for Christmas shopping or something. But we had some household things that have gone astray, so we had to go to the hardware store, and then we had to go to the other hardware store, and then we had to go back to the first hardware store. You know, one of those deals. Ooh, Chili is low-key boss at pumpkin carving. Oh, well, maybe you should come, like, share on Reaper Miniatures Facebook page or something so we can see your super cool pumpkin carving. It's almost like sculpting, right? Like traditional sculpting with stone, except pumpkin flesh. Alright, so while the bat's dry, I'm going to move that little halfling out of the way so I don't smudge black paint all over him now that I am happy with his face. I'm going to work on this little scaredy cat. None of my cats look like Halloween cats. But our girl cat is, I don't like to think, I still think of her as my little baby, but she's 12 now. I think. Yeah, that sounds right. And she's kind of chosen her old lady form, which appears to be creepy. She'll just go places that we don't spend a lot of time and stare at the wall for hours until we find her. It's like, okay, that's not super creepy and weird or anything. But I think every cat kind of has an old cat form that they choose. Archer just got more and more cantankerous. He kind of started out as an old cat, and then he just became a super old and cranky cat. And that was his charm. We're not, I mean, we put up a few decorations. We don't get a lot of kids. Our house is on a hill. And, I mean, there's more kids now in our neighborhood. When we first moved in, it was mostly retired people or empty nesters. But if you want to get good bang for your walking around buck in terms of candy haul, ours is not the neighborhood. The houses are further apart. There's lots of hills. There are far better places to go that aren't very far away. Yes, Fellender also wants Teely to share her awesome pumpkin carving because seeing other people's stuff makes him happy. Oh, that sounds great to you. Yeah, I'm sure that the ones from previous years, picture pumpkins don't go bad, so they're still awesome. Real pumpkins, alas, do not last forever. I can't even remember the last time I carved a pumpkin. I like to get gourds every fall, though. Like those little mini gourds. I wander around getting irate if I can't find my mini gourds. I don't think I pulled out a gray paint, which was an interesting choice. But we're going to try to make fake gray paint. Chromatic gray paint. So if you mix complementary colors together, you normally get brown or gray. And this is kind of an orangey. I'm going for, if you've used painter colors at all, and you mix burnt sienna and ultramarine blue, you get a really nice gray. So I'm aiming for something in that ballpark. And this is, again, I decided to pick up some Pathfinder colors and Doran blue. I have played around with some of the Pathfinder colors, but not all of them, so I wanted to get a little more. Wow, my paints are a bit goopy at the tips today. But I probably will need more gray, so that's fine. But now let's mix together and see what we get. It could be anything. Who knows? It could end up a little too yellowy, and I'll have to try again. But that's just the fun of mixing colors. So when you do mix two colors together, they almost always, it gets darker. It gets duller, and it gets darker. So that has too much orange. And I think I'm going to go to, I'm going to add some, no, I'm going to go with blue liner. I was going to add Nightmare Black, but the blue is so intense. And there's like a little greeny touch to it that I'm afraid it's going to make things go a little more yellow than I want. So in context, does it look gray? Not really. So clearly I need a lot more blue. That is a good question, Tia. Since we're discussing it on stream, I think that would be fine, and then we'll all know to find it there. So that is just something that you kind of have to accept about mixing colors, that when you're doing it, sometimes you're not going to get it right, and you're going to have to make adjustments and try again. And that's okay. That doesn't mean you're like terrible at anything. It just means that while there's guidelines of if you mix, you know, blue and yellow, you get green, individual paint pigments might have hidden colors that you don't know about there, particularly in our kinds of paints. And they might, you know, color theory is a theory. It's how ideal colors would act. When you actually start putting colors out on the palette, they're not always going to do that. And that doesn't mean that you're bad at color mixing or you're doomed to never be able to figure it out or something. It just means that's how color works. Or that's how pigments work. And you just gotta tweak and try again. So I think when I go close in, it does that thing where it's not focusing right, but it is what it is. Let's see. So, looking at my owl, I want him to be like a little brown. So I'm using, the other colors I pulled out to use were like that was oxide red I was using. This is oxide brown. I have oxide yellow too. Those are all kind of less saturated versions of those colors. They're like, we call them earth tones, and I like those for various purposes. And I do want to dull that down just a little. Maybe go a little darker for the first bit, as it was so efficient to work up from the darkest color with the Ghost Bride. I'll probably do that on all of these guys. And it's not like I can't add more shadows later if I want. So if I make his body, you know, darker and a bit duller, then that's kind of going to be sandwiched in between the more saturated pumpkin and the more saturated owl eyes. So it'll be like a place for the eye to rest. It'll be contrasting because it has different properties to the other two areas. And that should help make the miniature a little more legible and interesting to look at. This is the kind of place where I like having a hook brush. So this one isn't, and it's working okay. But you know how you get that little hook on the end of a synthetic brush? If you've got those little underhangs, it's a great way to paint those. since that's such a indented crevice, I'm going to put a little more darker color in there for a deeper shadow. Now, I don't promise I'm going to be able to get all three of these guys done on stream. I was a little bit surprised I managed it with the Ghost Bride. I thought I'd be able to because of the limited color scheme. So I really wasn't having to make color decisions or do much mixing because I did that before the stream started. I was just applying values of paint. And that ends up being a lot quicker to do. See if there are any other places I want to. I lost all my blue liner, I think. I don't have the technological prowess to try to look at Discord while I'm streaming, so I'm going to have to look at those afterwards. But I will take Wendy's word for it that Tialia's pumpkins are pretty awesome. I'm just adding, while the paint is wet, so essentially it's wet blending, I guess. I'm just adding a little more shadow to some areas. And furry, feathery, textured type surfaces are good surfaces to practice wet blending on. In fact, why don't I just continue with that idea and start putting some of this lighter color in as well. Now this, I'm actually curious. So amongst some of my other, painter friends that do work for Reaper and stuff, there are several of us who consider small familiar type birds to be one of the most annoying things to paint. Like, it just doesn't seem to come out right for some reason. They never look natural or convincing or something. And I'm curious if other people have been frustrated by that or they think they're just fine to paint. Questioning some of my choices of paints. I mean, I think I should have brought over some different paints than I did. But painting with a limited palette or just a selection of paints that you have on hand is a different way to do limitations. There's always interesting things to learn when you do that kind of thing. Can make you get creative with mixing or the color choices you have to make things stick out. This figure is ending up very warm, but I think I might go for more of a cooler vibe on the bats for sure, and maybe the cat. Quinny Lou does not enjoy painting anything with feathers, to be honest. Yeah, feathers are a time investment, that's for sure. This is pretty much the quick way or you're just going to be doing this for hours way. I don't think there's a lot of in between. All right, now for the bats, I'm going to use this color that I made for the tombstone. So I'll probably want to make more of it to start the highlighting as well. Hopefully they won't. This piece may end up being kind of monochromatic, but I'm going to use, probably, so what you can do with this mix too, so this would be like if you had burnt sienna and ultramarine blue. And there are actually colors in the Reaper line that do this even better. I just didn't think about it, and I don't have a gray. I mean, I can mix black and white, but I like not, you know, straight up black and white. Neutral gray. I like not straight up neutral gray. Sorry, one of the things that I have today is an appointment for a massage. I've had a headache for 2 weeks, so this is probably why I'm not making a lot of sense. And the theory is that this is because my trapezius muscle is so tight that it's tightening up my neck muscles, and then that's messing up my head. So I apologize if I'm not making a ton of sense. So this actually, on the figure, is kind of a warm gray, which is fine. We'll do the cat more cool gray. So yeah, steroid shots, steroid pills, none of it seems to be helping very much. Queenie LaRue says there's also the cry and throw in the trash way. Okay, so we have three ways to paint feathers. The quick way that doesn't look that great, the long way that looks great but you want to like just hurl against the wall, and then actually hurling it against the wall and throwing it in the trash. And Green Users, who is Bob and or Julie, and I bet they both agree on this one actually, said sculpting feathers is a pain too. Julie, you are amazing at it though. Teely says, I actually love painting feathers. I get messy doing wings, but I played around and made a combo wet blend dry brush process for getting the fun gradients that many feathered wings have. Oh, that does sound nice. Yeah, it's not, my head doesn't ache like the whole time, but it aches enough, and it aches when I cough, so it's really awesome to combine that with a chronic cough condition. It has been quite super fun. What's funny is my back doesn't even hurt anymore. It's like, I don't know, I guess it's all this referred pain or something like that they call it. And my back didn't even hurt that much in the beginning, so I was kind of, that's why I ended up going to the doctor, because I'm like, okay, is something going on in my brain? And they're like, nope, it's your back. So that part's a relief, because a couple weeks before that I had an incident where my left eye went cloudy. Like the vision of my left eye went cloudy for a couple of hours. And if you Dr. Google that one, the answers are alarming things. So I went to the eye doctor straight away. But I actually wonder if that was kind of a precursor to this situation. I'm doing somewhat broad highlights with this first color that's not, you know, that much lighter than the black. Depending on what angle I hold them at any rate. I am normally a little fiddlier when I highlight black. Usually what I do is I go up like this, and then I end up going back down, but refining the blends. I'm going to make their little bodies. My the bat picture I looked up had quite a gray body where the fur was. And I think that will help make it easier to spot the body, you know, next to the wings when you're looking at them from a bit of a distance. And then it will help, if I make the body a bit lighter and the eyes are black, that's going to help the eyes stand out more too. But now I'm wondering, what does the ears on my bat, my sample bat, who maybe just is a very old bat, I don't know, are actually black also, so I will not make them grayer. These guys are so cute and cranky. I don't know if you can see their little faces. They're just fun. I mean, I can try staying zoomed in, but I think it upsets the focus more for some reason. One day I'll get all that stuff figured out. I've thought about trying to have a palette camera, but having the palette at much of a distance from me is going to make it really tough to paint. I'm really used to painting exactly like this, with the palette right underneath the miniature, so I can just kind of poke my head. I don't know if you can see me doing that in the other camera, but I'm kind of like looking under my visor to see the paint and, you know, what kind of blow I've got on the brush and stuff like that. Let's see. He said I would die sculpting feathers now. Well, Julie must love us because she keeps doing it for us. If he paints. Is an optician, definitely go straight to a doctor when that happens. Yeah, I was particularly worried because it was one eye. Years ago, I had like the classic migraine or a blind spot thing. And I didn't even get a headache. I got all nauseous and stuff, but I didn't get a headache. And I don't typically get migraines. But when it was just one eye, that seemed like a little more alarming. So I did not want to have retinal detachment or any of that fun stuff. I'm just like trying to quick mix some highlights for the wings and maybe the bodies, I guess, too. Much better safe than sorry when it comes to the eyes. Yes, I agree. And in fact, it was hilarious because I had my annual eye exam scheduled for 2 days after this happened, and I was like, well, 2 days after they made the appointment, because it happened on a Friday, and I called them, and they're like, well, everybody's gone for the day, but come in Monday. And I'm like, okay, my annual appointment's Wednesday, but I'm going to do it anyway. I suspect I will be less thrilled about this when I get the bill, but that's fine. Because I do think eyes are pretty important. I'm willing to go with that. And now I'm just waiting for my new glasses to come in. Been quite a while since I had new frames, so I'm excited. But yes, the consensus is that it was probably an ocular migraine. But I actually still have one more test. I'm supposed to go get my carotid artery ultrasounded in November, just to make sure it's not some other weird thing that's not directly in your eyes. Julie says, Ron loves me sculpting feathers. I don't mind, but I don't tell him that. No, we won't tell him. We'll tell him that it's horrible torture, and that's why you have to charge him twice as much. But we are grateful that you sculpt us such nicely. You know, when the sculpting is detailed and well done on feathers, that really does make it a lot less agonizing to paint them. Yeah, it's just funny about birds, because I painted like little cat familiars, and I've done tabby patterns and a lot of tiny little detailing stuff on them, and it's like, whatever. It takes a minute and a little bit of attention, but it's not, usually it does come out in the end, but for whatever reason, the birds, it's a crapshoot whether they're going to come out in the end. Are these guys in focus at all? I don't know. Because I can move the palette to the side if they're not in focus at all. So I've switched to a fairly small brush because they have there is little fur sculpted, and I want to try to work with the texture. So I'm making these little line brush strokes to try to accentuate the fur texture and make the bodies, you know, the bodies are furry where the sails of their wings are going to be leathery. So it's nice to accent the different textures. So I'm going to turn him to the side a little so I can keep doing that motion. If you, I can't remember if I mentioned this on here before, I probably have. But so one of the reasons having a holder is good is because you're not touching the miniature and rubbing that. You get a lot of rub off with that. And plus you're putting your finger oils and stuff on the figure. But also because it allows you to turn it around to reach all different kinds of angles and stuff. So the more you can keep your brush hand kind of making the same motions. So when I want to, you know, this guy's at a slant. So I was painting up and down on this one. I don't want to paint at a slant. I want to move the figure so that I can paint that same motion. But I also want to keep in mind that if I'm painting the light coming from above, I shouldn't paint the highlights exactly where I painted on this guy. I'm going to paint them a little off to the side. And the reverse on this guy. So I'd hold him like this, but I'd paint the highlights on the right side. So this light blue color is Snow Shadow. I've talked before about tinting strength, how some colors are like super powerful and you just need a little bit of like clear blue and then a whole lot of yellow if you wanted to mix it green. And Snow Shadow is a very weak color. So when you use it for highlights, you have to add like a bunch of it, as a rule. I'm just going to use a little bit of pure Snow Shadow. In a few spots. With my tiny brush. All right, now I will go back to the wing sails. And to make my life easier, I will keep using the same. It'd be interesting if I mixed up the grays a little. You could get kind of a different effect. But then that's one of those things where you have to think about speed and efficiency versus different effects. So it depends on what you're painting it for, whether that becomes worth doing. But this I want to paint smoother because it's the leathery look of the wing sail. So it doesn't have to be like, you know, super crazy smooth, but I don't want to have the little dashes like I did on the fur parts. And technically the finger bones are a little lighter usually, or it's the skin over the finger bones. I mean, I don't think the bones are exposed. If you look at a picture of a bat. I definitely want to bring those out. And if I were sensible, I would not have started with this tall bat, the leader bat, I guess, because that is sort of the one that people are most likely to look at. So if I was experimenting and stuff, it would have been smart of me to pick like this bat and work out my color choices or how I was going to highlight them or whatever, and make sure that it was working, and then go to the more prominent bats. And the same thing with, like, if you're working on skin, you would make experiments with, you know, the forearm or the calf or something and not jump straight to the face. But it is hard, even now, it is still hard for me to remember to do that. And I tend to go for the, either just what's kind of organizationally the most obvious place, or the part that I'm most excited or interested in painting, which will tend to be the face. And then I kind of have to sometimes remind myself, it's like, nope, if you just mix these colors and you're not 100% sure the mixes are right, go test it on a less obvious, a place that doesn't stand out as much to people, and make sure that's the place. Yes. Okay, so I have a little blue liner off to the side, and I like to shadow black with blue liner. So where I want really deep shadows where the wings are kind of hanging over, I'm going to come in with blue liner, because blue is a cool color. It appears to recede, so in some ways a dark blue can sometimes appear darker than straight up plain black. But you don't want a super saturated blue for that, I don't think. Anyway, I guess you could try it with like Nightmare Black. But Nightmare Black isn't as dark as blue liner, so I would go with blue liner. I don't know if I need my little brush back. I had gone to a slightly bigger brush because I was going to be blending more, but down here I'm mostly picking out the finger bones. Because I do want those to be lighter than the wing sails overall. Just a bit more of a highlight. I love their cute layers. I just put a little bit of the pure snow shadow in a few spots. Now I'm going to pause for a minute and think about whether I need to do anything that's going to take time to dry. Let's see where the owl is. If he's drying all right. So the wet blending came out pretty well, I think. It's not perfect, but it's established a transition range of colors. So I'll go back to him for a minute and work within that transition range. Just make sure that everything is where I wanted it. Maybe birds are partly tough because the pattern and the color on their feathers usually doesn't have anything to do with the structure of the feathers. So it's like if you're trying to paint and pull out the structure of the feathers, but then also this other element, that becomes challenging. I forgot that I want to do a wash on the gravestone, and that will take time to dry. So I'm going to just do that quickly. I'm using a little brush-on sealer that I should have shaken more than I did. That one in particular you need to shake a lot because it's got matting agent in it, and the matting agent will collect at the bottom of the bottle and potentially frost stuff if you haven't been fairly consistent about mixing it up. Almost feel like I want a little black in there. Yeah, that's gonna have to dry before I can really even address the tree at all. But I should probably get you guys to give me efficiency tips because I'm like a super slow painter. And I know we have a lot of people, a lot of Reaper followers who are great at knocking stuff out for their game and do some really amazing stuff really quickly. They even do stuff for our game, the Reaper, the game that some of the Reaper artists play on Friday nights, which is coming up this week. And my understanding from Frank at Nightheart is that it will be suitably Halloween themed. So prepare for a little spookiness. We definitely had some undead action last year. I mean, there were a lot too. I was a little concerned for our safety last year. But we figured it out in the end. Very harvest owl, I guess. I didn't want to put any of the, I thought about it, but I decided not to put any of the pumpkin orange directly on the owls so that they weren't too integrated. But yeah, that's one of those things you probably get frustrated because sometimes the color advice is mix all the colors together so that everything, you know, the same colors are in everything. And then sometimes it's like, well, make this part cool and this part warm. I do totally get why that would be frustrating. I did not start doing this with any kind of natural inclination towards color. I think Anne is someone who does have kind of, some people kind of have an innate sense of color, but I don't think you have to be someone who has an innate sense of color to end up being a good painter. Like, you don't have to start that way to become a good painter. You can learn color theory stuff and you can experiment and you can just try stuff and see how it works. And then, you know, sometimes it comes down to, I was just kind of like, well, I feel like it shouldn't be this. And that's okay. Maybe I'm wrong. And if I'm wrong, I can just repaint it. It's not, you know, it's acrylic paint. It's not the end of the world. It covers over itself beautifully. And hopefully I would have learned something to apply to the next thing I paint. So mainly with the head, I'm just trying to, you know, emphasize the roundness of it a little. That color, which I don't think I think I went down enough with the highlight to bring out the roundness. Don't want to have too much yellow in the fur or in the feathers because I do want to have nice yellow eyes. Get going out of frame a fair bit. Thank you, Quinty. I'm gonna try going back to the palette on the side. I suspect it's not helping, and we'll see how that goes. My gray paper. I may be more awkward, but hopefully I'll stay in frame a little more. It's probably because I'm trying to look at places that are that I have to look closer when it's detail stuff, and these guys are kind of small. And I'm old. And I wonder if I should try putting on my other magnifier, but then I would really have to bend over. So I want to make sure the area around his eyes, you know, the edge of his eyes is nice and black. Well, this is actually blue liner, but nice and dark. Partly because I think it really is. Let me consult my, yep. If I consult my little buddy, they really do have a very dark ring around the edges of their eyes. And partly because it's going to help the yellow color pop. I went back because I was pretty sure that I had too much paint on the brush and I didn't want it to go over to the other parts. And covering up the gray or white or whatever I had on the eyes, it already, I think, makes the feathers look a little lighter. So the feathers were looking kind of dark, and they might still be a little. I might still need to adjust a little, but sometimes you have to have more of your coloring before you know that for sure. I don't know if my picture has their feet. Oh, their feet have a lot of feathers, looks like. So it should pretty much be the same color except for the very tip. And what was the very tip? His talons are black. So I will do that part right at the end. Actually, I think those were talons. This is definitely a moment where I would normally... so there, if you see that paintbrush, even though I don't mind kind of slopping stuff all over for base coats, that is very likely at this stage of completion to get paint where I don't want it. So I just want to get some of that off for sure. When working with thinned paint in particular, you want to check that you have correct load on your brush and you wick it against a paper towel, or I use these damp sponges quite a bit. I'll put it here actually. So it doesn't take all the moisture out, and it's pretty soft on the brush, I think, is the other reason I'm kind of attracted to the sponges. So it's similar to what, if you watch Michael Proctor on Tuesday on Crow's Nest, or if you've seen him paint in classes or something like that, he uses a damp paper towel. But I like you can reuse the sponges for a long time. Eventually they do kind of get kicked up with paint. And then I switch to another one, but typically I use them for a pretty long time. So it turned out he has one leg is on the stalk and the other leg is on the pumpkin. So I was adding some of the blue liner down there for the talons that are on the pumpkin. I think I missed a little spot of white or gray or whatever I primed him with. So I should have showed these guys more at the beginning. I guess I haven't done the cat much. I used, Reaper has 3 colors of brush on primer, white, gray, and black. So I didn't use any of the white because these are all Halloween guys, but I used the gray and the black to start my colors, you know, close to the values where I was going to be. So if I knew I was painting a black cat black, it's going to be a lot easier to paint. You know, I'm going to have to do fewer coats of black if I've started off with a black primer. But if I'm painting something that's more of a vivid color, like this pumpkin, that I would want to paint over white or gray primer. It's just going to take fewer coats to do. It's not that you can't ever, you can get to whatever color on any primer. It's just going to take you more coats. So it's how much, if you want to save some time, start with a primer color that's closer to the value of the colors that you're painting. Just trying to pull out the, I don't think it's very obvious where the wings meet the body. I would like it to be more obvious. And I would also like it to be more obvious where the beak is. Which is apparently kind of gray. Let's see if I go with that in the end. Don't know if the eye sockets are dry, but let's find out. So this isn't straight yellow oxide. I'd mixed a little bit of oxide brown, I think. Oxide brown in to work on the feathers. But I think we talked about this last week with the giant eyes of the, you know, giant chibi style eyes. Eyeballs are balls. So just as I was working on this sphere of the head is going to look more sphere-like if there's a darker shadow here and a lighter highlight here. an eyeball is going to look more like a ball if you have the space. I mean, on a gaming scale character, you do not have the space to do this. Well, I don't. I mean, there may be magical people who can do this. I don't know. But when you're talking about something like a chibi or a bust or something like that, the eye is, the sclera, the white part of the eye, is going to look darker, like towards the corners where it's sloping away. It's going to look darker if there's an eyelid overhanging it. It's literally casting a shadow on part of the eyeball. And when you have bigger eyes to work with, it looks cool if you do some of that stuff on them. So I'm starting with a slightly darker yellow than I want to use in the end, because I'm going to go over it with that lighter yellow and leave some of this darker color towards the edges, and that will hopefully make the eyeball look more like a sphere. Well, I mean a half a sphere, since we can't see the other half, but it's still spherical. So. Hopefully that made sense. I don't feel like I'm peak sense making today, but that's the nice part with the stream. There'll always be another one. I'll make more sense that day. Or if you come to the blog, that's one reason I write things down, because I can take time to edit it and make sure that I make sense. All right, I actually think I have the microphone further away than usual, and I know that I trail off and mumble when I'm doing the painty part, so I want to try to make sure that you can still hear me. So now I'm going over with pure oxide yellow, and I'll probably add some white to that, or I might even go in with a more saturated yellow. So I'm just trying to leave a little bit of that slightly darker color on the edges. This side, I think I messed up some of the lining a bit. So here's that water. I don't know if you can see that water drop. That happens to me all the time, and it'll get in your paint, and then it won't be the consistency that you wanted it to be. Definitely watch out for that evil water drop hanging off the ferrule. So you notice I was forming my point. So I don't lick my brush. In fact, I never really have. I've formed the point when there's not paint on it, but this I have done more. Nowadays, I really only do it when I'm doing detail stuff. So something like eyes, I might end up doing that. Or if I'm doing super fiddly blending and I'm trying to test the paint consistency. But most of the time, I'm happy just putting it on my sponge, and then if I have concerns, I can kind of test it here on my holder. If you are a brush licker and you'd like to stop being a brush licker, I watched a movie on Netflix a couple days ago that might inspire you. So, and I'm sure some of you are familiar with this history. The movie's called Radium Girls, and it's about the factory workers who painted glow-in-the-dark paint made from radium onto watch faces, which was actually, important during the war for soldiers to be able to see in the trenches and stuff without light. So they kind of sold it as a war effort thing, but the downside is that, it's radium, just like Madame Curie didn't do so well with that after a while. Neither did these girls, and the company owners knew a lot more about that than they revealed, and they didn't really protect the workers, and it was during the time when, people were starting to try to lobby for workers' rights and deal with stuff like that. So it was kind of interesting to watch that, but they were actually told at work to lick their brushes to form the point. So it's like you'd get a load of paint and form the point on your tip, on your tongue, and then paint a nice numeral on top. So there'd be like a printed numeral, and then they were painting the glow-in-the-dark paint over that so that you could still see it when it was dark. And they used to, you know, goof around with it and use it for fingernail polish and stuff like that too, because they didn't realize that it was toxic. I mean, initially no one realized it was toxic. They used it in health spas and sold radium water coolers and stuff like this. But even after it was becoming more known that it was not healthful, these factory workers were not being protected. In fact, being told to do like literally the opposite thing of what you're supposed to do. But if you are a brush slicker, that might be the inspiration you need. Not that there's anything like radium in Reaper paints, but when something says non-toxic, it means non-toxic for intended use, not you should put this in your omelet. And now the tricky bit is getting the central circle of the pupil, especially without my more close-up specs. But I do want them to look nice and starry. So I had added, I forgot to mention it, but I had added some torchlight on top of the oxide yellow to make it even brighter. I think I've gotten the one eye a little smaller than the other, but that happens. See, he's squinting a bit. But I feel like that one is a little bit off center. I'm just gonna come back with some of my yellow paint.